Welcome to today's show. I have with me George McGehrin. George, welcome.
Alan, it's good to be here. It's good to catch up with you.
So, George, you're a founder of the McGehrin Group, and you've done quite a few things in your life. But why don't you give us your story, background, how you got where you are today, and what it took to get there?
Yeah, so I was, I was taught like a lot of, here in the States, I was taught like a lot of folks to sort of, you go to school, you work, you do well academically, and then you work for a company. That's what I was taught at home, right? I was taught zero risk, you play it safe, and you work someplace for 20, 30 years. And this is, I'll be 46 in April, right? So this is just to give you some context with the generation. I grew up with when you still had to like get up to turn the TV channel and, before the remote, right? So it was just a different, sort of not a lot of risk, at least in my family. So I did that, I went to school, had the opportunity to travel a little bit in Europe, got back here to the States, got a job for a large corporation, and life was good until one day I got a call. I was in New York City. I got a call from a recruiter, headhunter, who was in Miami, and he said, "George, there's an amazing opportunity in Miami. You need to." It was for a consulting gig. You need to come down and interview. And 3 or 4 days later, I was working and living in Miami, right? So, the weather in New York City, New Jersey, and that, like in January, is horrendous. And I was like living a dream. So, in my 20s, young. Didn't do any due diligence about the opportunity. I jumped on the money. I burnt all my bridges with one of these big fours that I was working at, and in the consulting realm. And life was good for 3 months. One day I go into the office, and sort of there's a sad look on everyone's sort of face, and they were closing down the company I was working for was closing down the office, so I was unemployed. So I was like, okay, I asked the HR lady, what do I do? I'm employed, like, what's the next step? And she said, well, you need to get unemployment. So I go to the unemployment office in Miami, and, next thing I know, I'm thinking, look at the people next to me. I've done everything correctly. I'm still unemployed. And I made the decision literally in the unemployment office, never to work for somebody ever again, And I thought, I think I had some luck there. I started to evaluate, I've done everything I was supposed to do scholastically. I've worked hard. I played it the way they told me to, and I was still unemployed, And I thought, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail on my own terms. And if I win, I'm going to win on my own terms. And that was kind of it. So, my plan was to go around to the little recruiting agencies, which is the company I run a recruiting company now. Look for a job, get like a 9 to 5, and then I could start a business at nighttime. Little did I know, I walked into literally the business that I have now, got into recruiting, and I've had it for 20 years now, But I worked at a small place for like 3 months. 3 months later, I said, I can do this myself. And I started, I took a risk to start a business. And it went from bad to worse, by the way. If you ever, for the entrepreneurs out there, it's not as sexy as it could be. And I went from broke to broker, for 3 years. And then I just kept on showing up, Alan, every day I would just show up. I remember sleeping thinking, I'm one day closer to not being poor, one day closer. And one day I was, one day I wasn't poor. And that was the drug that got me, I got hooked. So that was kind of the idea,
What was your first sale like?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. I spent the money before I spent the commission before I earned it. So I had a guy. This is a recruiting thing. He's an accountant, and I placed him. And he went. He was excited, and it was for like a senior accountant role. The commission was $12,000. That was the commission. This is 20 years ago. $12,000. Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah. So he said, George, you know what? I'm so excited for this new job you got me. I'm going to go to Disneyland, Disney World. This is in Florida, to celebrate my new job you got for me. Great. You're starting Monday, Perfect. I was already I mean, if you learn this very quickly in sales, like it's not real money until it's actually in your bank account, and then even then, so it's not, sometimes doesn't mean anything. And he went to Orlando to celebrate his new job. His old boss, while the guy was in Orlando, calls him up and he said, "Hey, I'll pay for your trip, your weekend there. Just come back to work on Monday." That was it. I didn't know this because I was in Miami, and I was having fun and celebrating my $12,000 close that I didn't earn yet. I didn't even send the invoice yet. And Monday morning, that was my first reality of the business that I'm in now. Monday morning, I get a frantic call from my first client was Freightliner. They do the trucks, right? Freightliner calling me. So bless you. Freightliner was calling me saying, "Hey, where's your guy? Like, he's not here." And then, I called I said, let me call the other guy. Let me call the guy at work, his old job. And he picked the phone up, and I just knew this is not good. And then he told me the story, and he said, "I'm sorry, I just had to do what's best for my family." And that was my first close. So my second one, unfortunately, I had somebody die. The guy passed away, right? That was my second close. So, but the second one I knew kind of not to, I was pretty traumatized by somebody that passed away. But my first close was, I learned very quickly, it's not over until the fat lady sings. Like, it better. So, for those entrepreneurs out there, a deal is something that's inside, you've received payment. That's a deal. Don't count $1 million deal or a $30,000 deal or a $300 deal if someone hasn't exchanged money for your service yet. So that's the lesson number one that I've taken, the last 20 years, and I teach the new guys on my team the same thing. Like, it's not over until it's over.
Well, that makes sense. So let's move forward then. Today, your model is how big are you with
so we've got,
the group?
We've got 40 people now. So we've got 40 people. To give you some little bit of context there. So I built up this business 2008, 2009. All my clients were at the time eventually became banks and financial institutions. So I had 50 people in the team, and one day I got a call from all my clients saying, "Hey, George, the party's over," and I literally had to fire 50 people. I went from 50 to 0, right? So, I literally had to start again after being in business 8-9 years. So I built when I decided I had this cross point, like, do I continue on, or do I just go get a job for somebody else? And so I decided to continue on, and I built a better mousetrap. So we've got 40 people now. We've been remote since 2009, right? So we've been remote. We use systems, quite frankly. We've got 4 businesses. One is an executive recruiting business. That's an 8-figure business. We've got a coaching business. We've got a branding business. We just actually started a podcast introduction business. So for, like, if you want to get on podcasts, 24 to 48 podcasts, we do the bookings for you. We put you on there, so it's for the entrepreneur. But we've got a couple of businesses going on. It's all related to connections of people, right? And it took me, I'll tell you, 20 years in business. My system that I have now, I work about 2 hours a day, right? It's like the 4-hour work week. It took me 16 years to figure that out. And then it took me 4 years to really get it, fine tuned. So it's not the way they paint it on Instagram, I can tell you that, and not at all. It's not at all that way. This. You've heard my story over and over.
You say that it's a 4-hour workday, but the reality is you develop systems and processes that require your attention. But when the problems come, they come. In other words, I love this story here. So let's move into people that you serve. Okay, when should somebody decide to use a recruiting company?
Right. So I'd say if you're let's say you're trying to if you're trying to hire somebody that you've continuously struggled to, let's say there's a lot of turnover, and just you get to a point where it makes sense to, and this is with anything, right? It makes sense to pay a professional to help you, with a coach or with but in general, I'd say most companies that use us they've looked for a certain role, for 3 or 4 months, maybe 6 months. They've had some luck. They haven't had, any luck, and they decide to mitigate some of their risk and delegate it to us, right? So I'd say if you're having a hard time finding that perfect person, an agency or recruiting agency will save you lots of time. The negative part of it, is that you have to pay a fee, right? So there's you're tapping into somebody's network, and as you know, network is everything, So that's we work with, on the recruiting side, we work with a lot of large organizations, right? So the people that we're dealing with, in general, they're making from $300,000 a year to $4 to $5 million. That's what we're placing, right? The thing I can tell you is that from an entrepreneurial standpoint, the ability to get to that person, the decision maker, is what I've learned is is probably the number 2 thing I've learned is you need to make sure that you're always dealing with the decision maker, right? Sometimes it's the wife, sometimes it's the owner of the business, sometimes it's the son. As an entrepreneur, you need to make sure that you're the person that writes the check. That's the person you need to get the okay from, and everything else becomes much more easier, So I think that's the mistake that people, at least a lot of the younger entrepreneurs make, right? Entrepreneurs, they hide behind email, and they go and they're dealing with unfortunately, I call them sort of you need to deal with the owner of the circus and not the clowns, right? Unfortunately, and that's the reality of the business world.
That's a great analogy.
Well, it sounds terrible, but it's true,
So, recruiting at the executive level versus other levels. Obviously, there's a difference in approach.
Yeah.
Could you give them
I mean, the executive is they expect real answers. They do much more due diligence on you and the opportunity. They show up. I mean, there is a difference between somebody that makes $500,000 a year and somebody that makes $50,000 a year, right? And I see that in the attitude in terms of how they prep, how they go in. They go in to win. It's not, and they go in with a very positive attitude of this is theirs to lose. It's not, it's not, if I get it. They're just I would say they're extremely positive in the way they talk. But they show up, prepared, right? So it's definitely, most of these folks are, education has nothing to do with it, but a lot of them are well educated, but I'd say they're well studied, right? They're well read, they know the market, they don't make assumptions, and that's kind of, I'd say, that's a big difference, right? So if you're selling to them, you need to also, make sure that you're prepared, to talk to them, right?
So, George, in your company also does executive branding. Can you tell us a little about how that service came about?
Right. So that was I call it all of my businesses are like this. They're sort of mistakes turned into business models, right? Where, you get somebody that asks you the same thing over and over, and then it becomes a service, right? So we had for many years, we had executives that would say, "Hey George, I need a resume done." This was before LinkedIn. And branding wasn't even a word, they didn't call it branding. They would just call it resume writing. You would get a question from an executive, "Hey George, I need somebody to, I might be on the market. I need some help on the resume. Do you know somebody?" And I would say, "Well, no, I don't know anybody." One day, the guy said, "Hey George, I got my resume written professionally. Can you take a look at it?" Yeah, I'll take a look at it. And I asked him how much he paid, and he said, "Well, I paid a couple $1,000s for it." And I looked at it, and I was just, it wasn't great work, And I said, well, and I literally marked up the whole document. I said, "Tell your resume writer guy, this is what you need to change." And they didn't want to change it for him, and I changed it. I did it myself, So I fixed the guy's resume, and he then said, "I've got a friend of mine who needs, your help. Do you want to help him?" And 1 became 2, then 2 became 3, and that's now a 7-figure business. The interesting thing is, a lot of the people we work with on the branding side feed into the recruiting side. So 25% of our recruiting revenue stems from the branding business. So, but we're working with the same types of people. 300,000 to a couple $1 million a year. We work with even entrepreneurs. Folks starting to get their story together, but now it's the resume and the biography and the speaker's biography and LinkedIn and that's how we started. It was just if you get the question over and over from somebody, sometimes it makes sense to say yes. You know, it's like that Jim Carrey movie where, have you seen that one where he says yes to everything? You know,
Yeah.
it's all, that's all we did. I mean, I wish I could say I was smart enough to, you know, or bright enough to say that I created that business. It was just somebody asked me the question over and over, and I thought, okay, you know, we'll just charge folks for this. And it went up. You know, it's a couple $1,000s, but it started at $100, then it went to 300, then it went to 5, and then it just, you know, now the service, you know, now we're 11 years into it that we've had that business. It's been a wonderful, you know, I to me, it's the good thing I like about it is that I get to talk to just cool people, you know, like they tell you stories and you find out what's going on in the marketplace before it happens, and it's just a fun little, it was a side hustle turned into a business, really. Yeah.
Well, you're one of those true entrepreneurs, the critical thinker, and seeing the problems and putting solutions in place.
Yeah, but I'm a terrible, you know, I have this problem. I'm a terrible executor, right? So I'm a great idea guy, but I've learned, you know, I've got coaches that I work with as well. You know, if I've got an idea, I need to get it out of my head and give it to somebody else and let somebody else, you know, rock with it, because, you know, sometimes I've had these ideas sometimes in my head for years. So I think as an entrepreneur, you have to figure out, like, you know, who are you, right? Are you the executor? Are you the idea guy? You can take tests on that too. There's a lot of tests you can see to how kind of personality you have. But I'm a terrible, I need a system. I mean, even today, right? I mean, today, you know, my team set up everything. All I need to do is click and kind of, you know, dial in, which was even hard for me because I didn't have Chrome and all my, you know, but, you know, you know, the overall idea was the podcasting thing, but I'm terrible at executing, you know, just terrible. So I've got other people that execute for me.
So for the listeners, I want to spend a little bit of time on this, because you bring up a very good point, and there's a mistake people make in the business world. You know, I've done over 1,000 interviews with entrepreneurs, and some people stayed small, and some people got really big. And the point you brought out there about I'm a terrible executor is what one of those entrepreneurs who got really big recognized early on, saying that this is what I do well, but
Right.
let me go find what the other person does well that I don't.
Right.
And,
Right. And that's what I do. I'm terrible. Like I'm decent on the phone. I'm decent in sales situations. I'm decent, you know, I guess, well, I don't know. You know, I've got a big schnoz, you know, but I don't know if I'm great on camera or not, but it's, you know, it's good for my personality. It fits my personality. And, but I'm not great at, you know, I'm not great at administrative tasks. I'm not great at tax and accounting. I'm not great at, I'm just terrible at it. I'm not good at adding things to the calendar. I'm not great at even putting, so if I do like after we get off today, right, I'll send a text message to my team telling them a recap of what happened, and I'll do it using my voice, and then they'll put it into the system. We use Salesforce as a CRM, but they'll put it into the CRM because they know me. I won't do it. Like I'll just forget to put it into the CRM. Basic, you know, $10 task I don't do well, you know. So, but you know, get me a contract with IBM, I can figure that one out, you know. But I can't use the, you know, the basic CRM with basic notes. So I think it's a big thing. Entrepreneurs, and I'm gonna tell you a story about a friend of mine I have. He's a talented guy, does amazing websites, right? Gets you on Google on the first page. I mean, he's just talented. But he's a solopreneur, you know, and he literally, until the COVID thing, I would see him every day at Starbucks. I mean, literally all day, just sitting there pounding away, you know. And I would tell him, I'm like, my brother, you know, you need to delegate, like, you know, like you need to delegate the stuff, and you can grow. And solopreneur is fun for about a week, but then if you really want to grow and financially be free, you need to hire people, you know, and you're never going to have money. I mean, the problem with an entrepreneur is you're broke the whole time, right? And you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you're like, okay, I just got $500. I need to eat. You need to get to a pivot point where you say, you know what, I'm not going to eat today. I'm going to hire somebody. And then, you know, it's going to be a disaster. And then you need to say, okay, I'm not going to eat again today. I'll hire a second person because the first person quit on me. and then you it's just and then by the third or fourth or fifth or sixth person that you hired, now you have one employee. They'll work out, and then you free yourself up, right? So it's a big problem with these entrepreneurs. Like, they want to do everything. There's no money in that.
And the fact that you're able to admit what you do well and move off what you don't speaks a lot for how your business got to where it is today.
Well, so, I think you should share this. I don't want to share the audio problem we had. I mean, your son was helping you. I mean, wasn't you weren't doing it. I wasn't doing it. Like, because that's not our core thing, right? You were smart enough to say, hey, I'm gonna let the professional be the professional, and I'll sit back and let things, get taken care of, right? Yeah.
So if I move into social media, use of social media in your business, like LinkedIn, you have a lot of people saying LinkedIn can be a great connector for recruiting and for jobs, and they actually have a service that they provide. What's your opinion on it? Do you suggest people use LinkedIn? So it's a great question. So I've got on LinkedIn, I have 30,000. I have 30,000 connections, right? Which is the maximum. Like I've had 30,000 connections since 2008. So I'm constantly sort of recycling people. I think LinkedIn is a great business card. I think it's a great way to sort of quantify some of your story. I think if you just think you're magically going to receive, like a cash machine, money coming in, it doesn't work that way. I think it's a good starting point, but it is kind of it's sort of, the 2020, 2021 version of a website for a company. I'd rather have, if I had a choice between a website and a website and a LinkedIn, I'll take a LinkedIn profile, all day if I have a choice, because it's like, you and I meet you out someplace and at a restaurant and say, oh, well, you're nice, well, the first thing I'll do is I'll go on Google, right? I'm going to go on Google. So who's this Alan guy that I just met? He seems like a nice guy. Who is he? LinkedIn is the first thing that shows up on that search. So I think people have to be conscious about, and this is why getting on, we started this a podcast business where we get entrepreneurs on podcasts. The reason we started that, and I would say, if you Google Alan Olsen, just Google your name. I mean, you control the whole thing with all your podcasts. It's like every show that you're and if you Google George McGehrin, I mean, I've been on 70 shows in the last 3 months. I mean, it's all of them show up, so you have to be conscious of how you look in Google, when client, says, who's this guy that wants to Zoom calling me, for a meeting? He's selling some SaaS service, who is this guy? They're going to Google you. So LinkedIn is part of that, playbook. That's why I like LinkedIn. How has COVID affected your company?
And I tell you this, I mean, from a finance standpoint, my version of COVID was 2009, right? We lost everything. So financially, I learned very quickly to have money set away and be prepared. So we were prepared. I mean, we were prepared financially this is probably not the norm, but we've grown, we doubled our sales from last year. So, we literally, every business line we have, we've doubled the sales. So we just pretend it like it didn't happen, I mean, I just told my team, listen, like there's a period of Darwinism here, right? You can either, even when the employment numbers, there's 20% of people that were technically unemployed, 80% of people are working, so let's be part of the 80%. There's still deals going on, there's still business going on. But we played very pro Darwinism, like, hey, let's just keep on moving. We hired some recruiters from firms that were laying people off, right? Because they didn't have the money to be able to keep them. So we're in growth mode. Yeah, it's been a great year. I mean, I hate to say that in the COVID world, but we were already set up. Like, everything we do is remote, right? So everybody on my team works remotely. Very early I had clients that were from Silicon Valley, and I learned how they do some of these startups, how they do things, and so we had. I've been I have a Zoom license as of like 3-4 years ago. It wasn't a new thing for me, right? So we've done really, really well. But it goes back to one thing, Alan, and this is important for an entrepreneur or anybody. it's about the relationships that you have with people. Like you can't send amazing. You're never gonna do a deal or a business or a sale by sending the most amazing email, or a text message. You need to get on the phone with people, meet people face to face, and Zoom or what have you, and that's how you do deals and business deals. You need to get what I call the unfair advantage, right? Where you have the unfair advantage ethically, obviously, to be able to get into situations, where maybe they didn't know who you were.
So George, how does someone reach out to you?
Yeah, they get a couple things. I mean, the easiest thing is, and there's, if they're interested in the recruiting piece, if they're interested in the branding piece, if they're interested in the coaching piece, which is an amazing, and if they're interested in, getting on a bunch of podcasts, they can just, if they look me up on LinkedIn, if they remotely type my name in properly, George McGehrin, they can just send me a quick message and they can go. LinkedIn is probably the easiest way, right? LinkedIn, just to send me a quick message and then we'll go from there. Set up a call. Okay. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I've been visiting here today with George McGehrin. He's the founder of the McGehrin Group. George, thanks for being on today.
Alan, it was awesome being on. I appreciate you being a good sport as well. Thank you.